I stared at my screen in disbelief. $250 a night. My lake house was being rented out to strangers without my knowledge. Dozens of 5-star reviews, glowing descriptions, and even professional photos of the interior, my interior, right down to the smallest detail. The person behind this had turned my family's sanctuary into her personal ATM, using my own pictures from social media in the listing. It was surreal. The shock on her face when I finally walked through that door was absolutely priceless. She had no idea I'd uncovered her scheme, let alone that I'd already set the perfect trap. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, because what happens next is a masterclass in sweet, calculated justice. When someone steals what matters most to you, revenge requires patience, evidence, and the satisfaction of watching them squirm as their empire crumbles. The notification came in while I was coding at my apartment in San Francisco. As a remote software engineer, I was used to unexpected messages, but the email from Olivia Martinez made my stomach drop. Noah, I think someone is renting out your lake house. There have been different people staying there every few days. I thought you should know. Attached was a link to the rental listing with photos that looked way too familiar, including one of me fishing off the dock, captioned, "The friendly owner will share his best fishing tips." It was a photo I'd posted years ago, never imagining it would end up in a shady Airbnb listing. And it got worse. In one shot, I noticed Diane Morgan wearing an expensive Rolex, and in another, designer shopping bags scattered around the living room. Someone with very expensive tastes was turning my house into a cash cow. I booked the next flight to Colorado, determined to find out what was going on. When I arrived at Silver Pine Estates, the exclusive lakefront community looked just like I remembered: pristine lawns, beautiful homes, and the sparkling waters of Crystal Lake. I headed straight to Olivia's house. She was a local teacher who had known my uncle well, and the concern on her face told me everything before she even spoke. "Noah, I'm so glad you're here," she said. "It's been strange. The HOA president, Diane Morgan, has been bringing people to your house for almost 3 months now. She told everyone you'd authorized her to manage the property while you were away." Olivia lowered her voice, leaning in closer. "And between us, I overheard a collector calling her about an overdue debt. She tried to play it off, but I could tell she was panicking. That designer lifestyle of hers might be more facade than fortune." The HOA had always been strict, sure, but Diane had taken it to a whole new level. According to Olivia, she'd implemented bizarre rules like windows can't be open more than 45 degrees and no fishing after 7 p.m. All enforced with hefty fines, of course. But the most disturbing part? She had keys to every house in the neighborhood. HOA emergency access policy, Olivia explained. But I've never seen a president use them like this. My blood was beginning to boil, but I knew confronting Diane immediately wouldn't give me the full picture. I needed evidence. Back in my rental car, I scrolled through more photos of the listing, formulating a plan. Then I noticed something that made me pause, a small detail I hadn't caught before. Tucked away in a drawer in my uncle's study was a framed photo I'd never seen. It showed a much younger Uncle James with his arm around a young woman by the lake. I couldn't be certain from the small image, but she looked strangely familiar. Before I could dwell on it, I called my best friend from college, Jason Brooks, a real estate attorney who lived a few hours away. I explained the situation and asked if he could book the house under his name to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, I discovered the rental account belonged to Crystal Lake Luxury Rentals, a company that didn't exist in any business registry I could find. As night fell, I parked across from my house, watching as lights came on inside. A luxury SUV pulled into the driveway, and out stepped a woman in her early 50s, immaculately dressed, confidence stride, driver following with several designer shopping bags. Diane Morgan, I presumed. I texted Jason, "You're not going to believe what's happening. I need your help, and bring your legal expertise." As I watched this stranger waltz into my home like she owned it, I felt a mix of rage and determination building inside me. Little did she know I had installed security cameras throughout the house when I inherited it, complete with clearly posted, "This area under video surveillance" signs she had apparently ignored. Tomorrow night, I whispered to myself, I'll be checking in as a guest in my own home. And host Diane won't know what's about to hit her. The next evening, I arrived at my own front door with a weekend bag, heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. Jason's reservation had been confirmed, and I was using his ID to check in as Nathan Brooks. The door swung open to reveal a young man in his late 20s, Ryan. He helped manage the property, he said, stepping aside to let me in. As I entered my own home, the surreal feeling was overwhelming. Everything looked almost the same, and yet slightly off, furniture rearranged, new decorative items placed around, and family photos hidden away. Ryan gave me a quick tour, and I noticed his discomfort when pointing out certain amenities that hadn't been there when I left. "The owner has excellent taste," I commented casually, watching his reaction. His expression flickered with something like guilt. "Yeah, the owner's rarely here. My mother handles everything." Before I could press further, the front door opened and in walked Diane Morgan herself, HOA president, unauthorized property manager, and apparent thief. She was every bit the polished, commanding presence I'd seen the night before. From her perfectly styled hair to her designer clothes and that Rolex gleaming on her wrist. "You must be Mr. Brooks," she said, extending her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Diane Morgan, property manager for Noah Whitman. He's an old friend who trusts me completely with his beautiful home." I shook her hand, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "So, how do you know the owner?" I asked innocently as Diane showed me around my own kitchen. She launched into an elaborate fiction about her dear friend Noah and how he had completely authorized her to manage the property while he was too busy with his tech career in California to visit. Each lie made my blood pressure rise, but I kept my face pleasantly curious. When she demonstrated how to use the entertainment system, I feigned confusion. "I thought you had to hit these old TVs to make them work, like back in the 90s, I joked. Diane laughed condescendingly. "Oh no, dear. This is top-of-the-line equipment. Noah spared no expense." I made a mental note to replay this conversation for her later. The true gut punch came when we reached the living room. There, prominently displayed on the mantel, was a framed photo of my parents and Uncle James, a precious memento I'd carefully placed in my uncle's study. Diane had moved it to serve as a charming decoration. "The owner must have a lovely family," I said, my voice tight with controlled rage. Diane nodded, completely oblivious to my true identity. "Yes, such a shame about his parents. But his uncle raised him well before he passed, of course. Noah is much too busy to visit his childhood vacation home, which is why arrangements like ours make sense for everyone." She spoke with such authority about my life and losses that I had to clench my fists in my pockets to maintain composure. As the tour continued, I discreetly checked that my security cameras were still operational, relieved to find the small indicator lights blinking in their hidden spots. This property under video surveillance signs were still posted, though Diane had placed decorative items partially obscuring them, probably to avoid alarming renters. I was gathering evidence with every step, photographing rooms, recording our conversation on my phone, when Diane pulled out a list of HOA regulations guests must follow, including absurd rules like no opening windows beyond 45 degrees and quiet hours starting at 8 p.m. I nodded compliantly while documenting everything. After Diane was called away for an urgent HOA matter, I was left alone with Ryan, who seemed increasingly uncomfortable. We chatted briefly, and I learned he was an aspiring artist who had no interest in his mother's property management schemes. "I just help out," because he trailed off, then sighed. "My mom really needs the money lately." That comment confirmed my suspicions about Diane's financial situation. Before he left, I noticed Ryan glancing at the family photo with an odd expression I couldn't quite interpret. When I was finally alone, I began a thorough examination of my home. In the study, I discovered my uncle's safe had been tampered with. Inside, where important documents should have been, I found a folder of HOA paperwork with my forged signature. Diane wasn't just renting out my house. She was manipulating HOA rules and potentially embezzling funds under my falsified authorization. Immediately, I called Jason. "It's worse than we thought," I explained, detailing Diane's elaborate scheme. "She's forged my signature on official documents. This goes beyond unauthorized renting." Jason's legal mind kicked into gear, warning me about the seriousness of these acts and advising on what evidence to collect. As we talked, I noticed an envelope that had fallen behind the desk, an unsent letter from Uncle James with a cryptic reference to telling my son the truth. Before I could ponder its meaning, I received a message that Diane would return in the morning with a special guest to inspect the property. Ryan had secretly texted me, "Be careful with my mom. She's planning to sell this house." The game was changing rapidly. I checked my hidden cameras one final time, ensuring they would capture whatever scheme Diane was planning for tomorrow. If Diane wants to play house, I thought she has no idea who she's really hosting or what I'm about to uncover. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of my lake house as I sipped coffee on the deck, pretending to be just another vacationer enjoying the view. In reality, I was preparing for battle. After discovering the extent of Diane's deception, I'd spent half the night documenting everything and communicating with Jason, who was on his way. A gentle knock at the sliding door interrupted my thoughts. It was Amber Reynolds, the woman staying in the guest suite on the other side of the house. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said, joining me with her own coffee. "I'm a freelance writer. Came here for inspiration. Didn't expect all the drama with the property manager." When I asked what she meant, Amber rolled her eyes. "Diane charged me an extra $150 yesterday for excessive water usage because I took a bath instead of a shower. Said it was an HOA conservation regulation. Is that even legal?" Our conversation revealed that Diane had been collecting various violation fees from guests, none of which would ever appear on the rental platform's records. Amber also mentioned strange visitors at odd hours and how Diane seemed to be showing the property to potential buyers when she thought no one was around. "I'm a night owl," Amber explained. 2 nights ago, I saw her giving a tour to a man in a suit around midnight. Seemed shady. This information confirmed Ryan's warning text. While Amber returned to her writing, I texted Olivia asking if she could meet me at a local cafe. As a longtime resident who had been keeping tabs on Diane's activities, she would be invaluable to piecing together this puzzle. Olivia arrived looking nervous but determined. "I've been documenting Diane's HOA abuses for months," she confessed, sliding a notebook across the table. Inside were detailed accounts of arbitrary fines, rule changes without proper voting, and suspected financial mismanagement. "She's been terrorizing residents with regulations she makes up on the spot," Olivia said. "People are afraid to challenge her because she threatens property liens or public shaming at community meetings." She lowered her voice. "But that's not all. I think she's renting out at least 2 other homes in the neighborhood, owners who only visit seasonally." The scheme was bigger than I'd imagined. Just as Olivia finished her explanation, Jason arrived. His legal expertise brought clarity to our situation. "What she's doing crosses multiple lines," he confirmed after reviewing my evidence. "Forgery, trespassing, fraud, possible embezzlement of HOA funds. But we need to be strategic about how we expose her." We formulated a plan: continue gathering evidence, connect with other affected homeowners, and prepare for a confrontation with maximum legal leverage. As we talked, I received a text from Ryan warning that his mother was headed to the house with her investor friend in 30 minutes. It was time to return and witness whatever scheme Diane was planning. When I got back, I was searching through some papers in my uncle's desk when I found something that made my heart skip. A crumpled receipt in the trash showed Diane had used HOA maintenance funds to purchase her designer handbag. This was the smoking gun proving financial misconduct. Before I could photograph it, I heard Diane's voice at the front door. I quickly pocketed the receipt and pretended to be relaxing in the living room. Diane burst in with her usual artificial charm, but this time she was accompanied by Ryan and a stern-looking older man in an expensive suit. "Nathan, I'm so sorry to disturb you, but we need to inspect a few things," she said. "This is William Foster. He's a maintenance specialist." The lie was transparent. William's body language screamed, "Real estate investor, not handyman." "The current tenant will be leaving early," Diane told William when she thought I couldn't hear. "The owner's desperate to sell quickly. He's overseas and has authorized me to handle everything." William nodded, examining the property with a developer's calculating eye. "I heard him mention something about lakefront potential and a $700,000 starting offer, significantly under the property's actual value of $1.2 million. Diane was not only renting my house without permission, but planning to sell it at a loss, likely for a quick commission. The betrayal was so outrageous that I couldn't maintain my charade any longer. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room where they were discussing renovation possibilities. "Actually," I said calmly, "the owner isn't overseas, and he definitely hasn't authorized a sale." The room froze. Diane's face went from confusion to shock as I continued. "I'm Noah Whitman. This is my house, and you're trespassing." William Foster looked between us, bewildered, as Diane's professional veneer cracked. "That's ridiculous," she sputtered. "This man is clearly delusional, William. I have all the proper paperwork." But I was prepared. I pulled out my identification and property deeds. I inherited this house 6 months ago from my uncle, James Whitman. I never authorized anyone to rent it, manage it, or certainly not sell it. William Foster, clearly uncomfortable, backed toward the door. "I think I should come back another time," he said. Before leaving, he handed me his business card. "If you ever do decide to sell, call me directly." Diane's embarrassment quickly transformed into aggression. "You can't just barge in here." "I have authorization papers with your signature," she insisted, voice rising. "Forged papers," I corrected. "And I haven't barged in. I booked and paid for a stay in my own home to catch you in the act." Ryan stood silently by the window, unable to meet anyone's eyes. When Diane realized she couldn't intimidate me, she pulled out her phone and called the police, claiming I was an intruder who had broken into her client's property. The confrontation had escalated beyond anything I had anticipated. While we waited for law enforcement to arrive, I calmly set up my laptop on the dining table, pulling up the security camera feeds and documentation I'd gathered. Diane paced the room, alternatively threatening me with lawsuits and offering to work something out privately. When 2 police officers arrived, the situation grew even more tense. Diane immediately launched into her version of events, portraying herself as the victim of my supposed intrusion. "I have managed this property for months with the owner's full consent," she insisted, producing a folder of documents with my forged signature. I remained composed, showing the officers my identification, property deed, and most importantly, footage from my security cameras showing Diane entering the house on multiple occasions, bringing in personal items, and touring potential buyers through the property. I installed these cameras legally with posted notices throughout the property, I explained, pointing to the small signs Diane had tried to conceal. Ryan, in a surprising moment of conscience, didn't back up his mother's story, instead staring at the floor in uncomfortable silence. The police officers, after reviewing our competing claims, seemed unsure how to proceed. "This appears to be a civil matter regarding property management authority," one officer explained. "We can't determine rightful access on the spot, but the property deed does confirm Mr. Whitman's ownership. They advised us to resolve the issue through proper legal channels and critically suggested that neither party change the locks or restrict access until ownership and management rights were legally clarified." As they prepared to leave, I noticed Diane whispering to the senior officer, who nodded with uncomfortable familiarity. The implication was clear. She had connections in local law enforcement. "We'll be watching the situation," the officer told me, in what felt more like a warning than reassurance. I had won this round. But as Diane stormed out with a venomous glare, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The next morning brought another shock. While Jason met with the county clerk to obtain official copies of the HOA covenant documents, I discovered Diane had launched a smear campaign against me. Several neighbors had received emails describing me as an irresponsible absentee owner whose neglect endangered property values. She claimed my sudden appearance was part of a scheme to avoid paying legitimate HOA fines. One sympathetic resident even forwarded me the message, asking if I was really the mentally unstable squatter Diane described. The character assassination was comprehensive, fabricated timelines, false claims of harassment, and a complete distortion of who I was. My initial anger gave way to a strange calm. Diane's increasingly desperate tactics confirmed what I already suspected. Her position was crumbling. Jason returned with crucial information. The official HOA documents bore little resemblance to what Diane had been enforcing. "She's been operating under her own made-up rules," he explained, spreading the papers across the hotel desk. "The actual covenants don't grant the powers she's claiming. The fines, the access restrictions, the property liens, they're all overreach or completely fabricated." When I asked why no one had challenged her before, Jason shook his head. "HAs operate on intimidation and apathy. Most homeowners don't read the fine print, and fighting takes time and money that most people don't want to spend. Plus, Diane has created an environment where questioning her means becoming her next target." This revelation strengthened our legal position, but didn't solve our immediate problem. I was still locked out of my own house. While formulating our next steps, I received an unexpected text requesting a meeting at a local coffee shop. It was from Ryan. After debating whether it might be a trap, I decided to go, asking Jason to wait nearby as a precaution. Ryan was already there when I arrived, hunched over a coffee, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I can't do this anymore," he said without preamble. "What my mother is doing, it's wrong. It's been wrong for years, but this is different." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial statements showing Diane had diverted over $200,000 from the HOA maintenance fund into personal accounts over the past 3 years. There were also emails detailing her plans to sell my house at a below-market price to a developer friend who would kick back a consulting fee. "She's underwater financially," Ryan explained, voice barely above a whisper. "Bad investments, medical bills she won't talk about, and a lifestyle she can't actually afford. She's terrified of losing her status in the community." The documents Ryan provided were damning, but his next revelation hit me harder. "There's something else you should know," he said, pulling out what looked like a personal letter. "I found this in my mother's desk. It's from your uncle, James." The letter, dated shortly before my uncle's death, referenced a past relationship and expressed regret about keeping the truth from Ryan. A cold realization washed over me. As Ryan continued, "I think your uncle was my father. My mother never talks about my dad, just says he abandoned us before I was born. But I found old photos, letters. I think they had a relationship years ago that ended badly. I think that's why she hated him so much." "Why she hates you?" The possibilities stunned me into silence. Could Diane's vendetta be rooted in a decades-old romantic rejection? Was Ryan actually my cousin? Our conversation was cut short when Ryan received multiple texts from his mother demanding his immediate return. "She's organizing an emergency HOA meeting tonight to formally begin foreclosure proceedings on your property," he warned, standing to leave. "She's rushing it through while you're locked out, claiming continuous rule violations. Most board members just rubber stamp whatever she wants." Before departing, Ryan handed me one more item, a key. "It's for the back deck door." She had the front locks changed, but forgot about this one. I made a copy. With a nod of acknowledgement that carried the weight of his betrayal of his mother, he slipped away. I sat there processing this new information, the financial fraud, the personal vendetta, and most surprisingly, the possibility of a familial connection to Ryan. Jason and I immediately began constructing a counteroffensive. The emergency HOA meeting provided the perfect opportunity to expose Diane to the entire community at once. Using the financial documents Ryan provided, we prepared a presentation with irrefutable evidence of her misconduct. Olivia helped contact as many homeowners as possible, encouraging them to attend the meeting rather than submitting proxy votes that Diane could manipulate. By late afternoon, we had assembled a coalition of residents fed up with Diane's tyrannical rule, previously too intimidated to speak out. "This isn't just about your house anymore," Olivia told me as we finalized our plans. "It's about taking back our community from someone who's abused her position for years." Using Ryan's key, Jason and I entered my house through the back door to retrieve personal items and additional evidence. The place had been further ransacked, drawers emptied, documents scattered, family photos removed from frames. In Uncle James' study, the safe stood open and empty. We worked quickly, knowing Diane might return at any moment. I found my laptop hidden under the mattress, where I'd concealed it, containing backups of the security footage. As we prepared to leave, I noticed something odd. A box of my uncle's old cassette tapes had been dumped out, with one tape partially rewound as if someone had been listening to it. I pocketed it, thinking it might contain something important if Diane had been interested in it. Back at the hotel, facing the biggest confrontation of my life, I experienced a moment of doubt. Fighting Diane meant potentially exposing painful family secrets, engaging in a public battle with uncertain outcomes, and further delaying my return to normal life. The easier path would be selling the house and walking away. As if sensing my wavering resolve, Jason placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your uncle fought to keep this place in the family. He wanted you to have it, not just the property, but the memories it holds." His words cut through my hesitation. This house represented the only real family connection I had left. "You're right," I told him, determination returning. I was ready to give up, but Diane's pushed me too far. It's time to end her reign of terror over Silver Pine Estates once and for all.